everyone, welcome back to another edition of StarSound Speaks. This is episode 166, and it's Irlianna, Samsara of StarSound Astrology. And I'm really stoked because we have another fantastic guest on. Her name is Shu Yap from Australia, as you will quickly hear. That outrageous, one of a kind, the Aussie accent is unrivaled. So welcome, Shu.
Oh, thank you. And I hate the Aussie accent, so I apologise for it sounding like a real drool, but I think it sounds so terrible compared to an American accent. It sounds so much more refined. But it is what it is.
It's always greener, right? We don't like. I like yours, no, I don't like it. Oh, it's so cool.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to talk about today, what we're going to talk with Shu about is Planetary Days and Hours and what that is. And it's not something that's really that bandied about out there, but it's fascinating. And it just gives us another jewel in our astrological, jewelry case and a facet of understanding ourselves and everything. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get started, I just want to, remind everybody, I do have the Astrology for Beginners. I got Mercury retrograde breakthrough. I got the page to load on my website. These little things in life are so exciting. So anyway, you can check that out on starsoundastrology.com. And if you're interested, it starts June 14th. So we're going to give a nice little a 5-week mini course with me patiently running beside you as you learn to ride that bicycle. It's not hard and it can be fun. So anyway, that's that. All right, so on to you, Shu. All right, so I'm going to read you, first of all, who is this fabulous woman and why is she here? So Shu is a consulting astrologer, teacher and writer from Central Victoria, Australia, on the Dja Dja Wurrung Country. I hope I said that right.
Exactly, perfect. Well done.
Pretty good. Okay, so what that is these indigenous people's lands. Okay, and for Shu, astrology is a way of life, not just a livelihood. Her practice influences every aspect of her life as a grower, a beekeeper. How do you like that? Artist and mother of 3 on the land. Inspired by the Hermetic philosophy, Shu practices traditional astrology, is a student of alchemy, and embodies a sky-centered approach to her art. Certified at the Melbourne School of Astrology, actually Melbourne, as they would say that. Melbourne, the American Melbourne School. Anyway, sorry for messing that word up. And STA, School of Traditional Astrology, in Horary and Traditional Medical Astrology. She now runs a consulting practice, writes weekly planetary news on her blog, and teaches mentors and students worldwide. All right. Did I pick a good guest or what? Yes, I did. Yes, the Leo. Okay, I'll shut up.
Oh, you're funny.
Oh, she's like, oh my God, I didn't know I was getting involved. A Leo is
such a beautiful energy. Like I said before, I just love this fire energy. It's just so fun and inspiring, and you just bring it. And I can just imagine your students, your students have such a great motivator there, like a personal trainer in astrology, which is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I like that. Maybe I'll use that. Personal trainer in astrology.
PT astrologer.
So anyway, so Shu, and before we get into the Planetary Days and Hours, I always ask people, how did you find astrology? How did it find you?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I think it found me. It's something that just kind of fell into my lap, and quite magically as well. There's a couple of different experiences that I've had. My father passed away when I was really young, and one of the only things that I have of his was an astrology book, a Chinese astrology book, and I've never really got into it, but I've just always had that as this was my dad's and now it's with me. because moving countries and everything, you know, you don't get to take everything. So it's kind of like very special. It's one thing that I've always had. You know, then in high school, I think we had one of these houses where everyone, all the kids used to just come back to. You know, this girl just brought back a library book, and it was on the astrology signs, and I was just fascinated by it. And it was the only library book only book in the library that was on astrology. And I think as soon as she returned it, I borrowed it, and I had it kept checking out like continuously. Like I think I kept it the whole time, and I learnt all of the 12 signs back to front, you know, just by reading it over and over again. And then when I kind of just, you know, never did anything about it. And at 19, one year, nodal return, you know, I just woke up one morning and I thought, I have to study astrology. And so I rung someone that I knew who was a tarot reader, because in those days, you know, it was all kind of like thrown into the same cauldron, you know, like, you know, you're one of those kinds, you know, every, you know, esoteric study was kind of like the one study. So I rung up my only friend that I knew that was a tarot reader. And I said, do you know anyone that can teach me astrology? And she put me onto this lady, and this lady said, oh, you don't need a teacher. You just need to read a book and go to the Theosophical Society and get Robert Hand's book. And read it yourself, and you'll learn astrology that way. And so I went to the TS, we call it the TS bookshop in the city, and I looked at a book was there. I think it was Rob Hand's, I can't even remember the name.
Planets in Transit.
No, it wasn't Planets in Transit. It was the one that kind of showed you the step-by-step. I think there was even how to sort of set up a chart and everything.
Okay. Yeah, earlier.
I just looked at it and I thought, there is no way I would be able to teach this myself. And I kind of put the book back on the shelf, you know, a bit disappointed. As I looked on the side of the bookshelf, I saw a little sign, you know, only as a modest sign, the size of a business card, and it was, you know, Sean McNamara from the Melbourne School of Astrology doing weekly classes. And it was the thing that attracted me was pay by the week, because I was only a student at that time and I had no money. So, you know, being able to pay each week, you know, my $20 or something each week was like the only way I was able to do it. And it happened to be just down the road from where I lived. And so there it began, you know, like that was my 2-year foundational course. And, you know, I've just been studying ever since, really solidly. So
I love it.
Yeah, that's how it kind of me.
Wow, that's awesome. And then traditional astrology. I mean, when you studied. Melbourne School of Astrology was modern. We had modern rulerships and things like that. And then after I finished that course, I used to go to conferences all the time and kind of self-study and book myself into little workshops and courses here and there. Vedic at one stage as well. And I went to a conference in, I think it was around 2008 in Melbourne, or 2006 or something like that. And Ben Dykes was there. And at that stage, he was just presenting some new concepts in traditional astrology. It was only just starting to be disseminated now through the public. And I went to his talk and I was so fascinated by this old way of doing things. And it kind of reminded me a little bit about my Vedic studies too. The systems were a bit more aligned. And what I liked about the Vedic system was essentially how systematic it was. You know, when you finish studying your foundational astrology course, you still look at a chart and you go, where do I start? Like, I still have no idea. And Vedic gave me a lot of structure, like, you know, starting with the ascendant, looking at the ascendant ruler and things like that. And then when I heard Ben Dykes talk, I thought, wow, this is very much like Vedic, but more in my language, like more in that Western, you know, astrology language. And I was ever since, and I basically transformed everything that I learned. I had to let that all go and relearn everything from a traditional sense. And I'm very glad I did that early on.
about 7 years into my studies. I did that early on because I knew a lot of astrologers at that time who just thought this was all baloney and, didn't want to have to study again and to read, you probably found the same thing. And they're finding themselves now having to really change the way they read charts. So,
yes.
So, yeah, it was something I did, and I had youth on my side at that stage. I had no kids. I had all the time in the world. So it was lucky. Just good timing.
Awesome. Wow. So for some reason, I don't know, the whole concept of planetary days and hours, it just captivated me. And that's why I just wanted you to come on and speak about that. And if you could just explain to everybody, what is a planetary day and hour? Because most of us know that the 7 days of the week are named after, it's just astrologically related, right? Monday, moon
that's
day,
right.
And so on.
Yeah, that's right. But I just start just some overall, maybe just a bit of a background. I think like between modern and traditional and it turning more psychologically based in modern, I think we lost a lot of the omen-based astrological tools in that process. And the whole rationalization, after, Descartes sort of started that whole scientific revolution and totally debunked astrology, and Copernicus discovered that, the world doesn't actually, the planets don't actually revolve around the Earth, it's actually we revolve around the sun. And astrology went a really tough time, it was basically lost, all through that sort of 18th century. Mm-hmm. And the only way that it was revived was to give it some substance through psychology. And here comes the birth of that modern astrological age. But through that process, I think we lost a lot of the animistic, omen-based skills that an astrologer had. And I think planetary hours was one of those tools that was very much based around reading omens. And so planetary hours, to answer your question, was based on the day being divided into 12 portions, 12 daytime portions and 12 nighttime portions. And of all of the same, I guess the 12 daytime portions is based from daylight to dawn to dusk. So if you live in a country where we go through 4 seasons, in winter months you'll have shorter planetary hours and during the day and longer planetary hours of the night. And vice versa, if it's in the summer times, your daytime hours are going to be longer, so more than an hour, and then the nighttime hours will be much shorter. Mm-hmm. Around the equinoxes, at the autumn or the fall equinox and the spring equinox, the hours are bang on the actual hour because, 24 hours a day, 12 hours day and night. So we have that little variation, and that's something to be mindful of. And these days there's a lot of apps and calculators online that can kind of work that all out for you, but it's good to sort of know how the system was based. And I guess the system was based that every day of the week, which if you know the Latin languages, are ruled by a certain planet. So I studied French at school, so I only know the French language. So we think of Monday as lundi in French, the day of the moon. Tuesday, mardi, which is Mars. Wednesday, Mercury, which is mercredi, which is Mercury. Thursday, jeudi, which is Jupiter's day. Friday is vendredi, Venus's day. Saturday, samedi, which is
Saturn's day.
Saturn's day, but it was another explanation there, which I can't quite recall at this stage. And Sunday was dimanche. And that's the day of the sun. And it was based around that Latin term di solis, which is, I think, day of the sun, I think, something like that. So each day has an essence of an actual planet, but to break down each day, it can be broken down into planetary hours as well. So sunrise would start with the hour of the actual day. So if it's a Wednesday, a Mercury's day, from that first hour from sunrise on Wednesday, it will be Mercury hour. And then the hours go through by descending Chaldean order, which essentially means from the slowest planet to the fastest moving planet, and then it goes again. So that's in a nutshell how the planetary hours are calculated and devised.
I love it. Thank you. That beautifully said. So yeah, the Chaldean order, which is not something that most people, unless you're into traditional astrology, the average Joe doesn't know what that is, but it's a beautiful image. I mean, you can look it up online, and Chaldean spelled mostly Chaldean, and it shows all the planets in order of planetary speed. So it's not like when you do it in science class in school where you have the sun and Mercury and like that. It has to do with the speed of the planets. And so yes, what I wanted to ask you is when you said about that because of the equinoxes and solstices, with the always changing the length of time of the day carved up into longer hours, shorter hours, depending on that. So if you were in, when you say the first hour, let's say Mercury's day, the first hour at dawn is going to be Mercury's hour. And then does that mean an hour, like a 60-minute hour, or because you said, certain times of the year, they're shorter and longer?
Yes. Well, at the equinoxes, it will be 60 minutes. And then, say, take the fall equinox or the autumn equinox, what we call it here, the light will be decreasing. So that planetary hours length would also be decreasing until you get to the winter solstice. And those will be the shortest planetary hours, which will be, I think, around the 40-minute mark or so, or 40 or 50 minutes or something like that. Yeah.
Now, why should we pay attention to the planetary days and hours? I mean, it's another level of information, and
yes.
But it's really cool. And I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I'm thinking of a farmer planting, like you said, you live off grid, and how that you really
I guess philosophically, like that diagram that you were explaining before about the Chaldean order, about the spheres of the universe, based on that Neoplatonic model where the Earth is in the center, and then there's a sphere of the moon around, and then following that will be Mercury, then there's a sphere of Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the fixed stars. And so it was said that all of the energy from these spheres above would be filtered down to Earth through the moon. And the moon collects all of these energies and pour it onto the Earth. And the Earth is what distinguishes Earth from the rest of the other planetary spheres, is that we have the four elements, the four directions, the seasons, and it binds us into time. And that's where Earth differs from the spiritual realm. And so one way that we can tap into the essence of the spirits is through the planetary hours. It's like having a direct telephone call to that planetary spirit to be able to draw that essence down onto Earth, because each of these planetary spheres have correspondences to everything in matter. And it is said that everything that we can see around us, our tables, our computers, our plants, drinks, all animate and inanimate objects are made up of a combination of the planetary spheres. So an inert table, I might say that might belong to the sphere of Saturn because it's dense, it stays still, it doesn't move, but it forms the structure from which I'm working from, So each of the planets and all of its signatures and the multivalence of its archetypes translates some form in matter. And we hear a lot of ancient texts speak of planets in terms of forms and images. Actually, this is what the world is made of, just forms and images. And mentioned that, you know, you're very interested in eclipses, Irlianna, that, you know, the nodes very much remind us that these of the world forms and images, because eclipse time comes, or we have a big nodal transit, and all of a sudden we're very aware, or we get sucked into illusion of these forms and images around us. And so that gives us a little sense of, you know, what is our reality? You know, is this our reality, or are we going to all wake up one day and this was all a dream? You know,
Right.
So, you know, there's this weird kind of concept of these forms, images being our illusions, but, you know, they're all kind of we're kind of like puppets of these planets in a way, and learning to work with these planets, i.e. by conversing with them planetary spheres, or reading the omens that come up on their planetary hours, we can start to co-create with these forms and images and these archetypal resonances that exist all around us. We can be awake to them all. And this is where this animistic omen-based astrology that we've lost is making a bit of a resurgence now, popularity of these hours coming through.
I love it. You know, I remembered seeing once when I had a Twitter account a few years ago, I remember somebody put on Twitter, I used to live in New York City, so I could really appreciate this. And it was somebody in New York, and it was a subway platform in New York City. And the person took a photo of some anonymous person put up a little altar to Mercury on the subway platform so the trains would run on time. I thought that was so cool. Like the craziest things you see in New York, you know, a little altar to Mercury.
And you may also see a lot of little shrines, or, you know, secret shrines everywhere of Hecate in subways. Because it's like the underground crossroads, right? You know, she's the bearer of the key of the crossroads, and I've heard of that too. So, it's amazing how this world is.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. So how would somebody perhaps that's, you know, maybe new to astrology or just new to this understanding of planetary days and hours, how could they, what would you recommend if somebody wanted to know more about that and how to work with it?
Okay, well, one easy way to work with, or just to observe it first, and it'll blow your mind, is to just get an app. There's loads of apps that you can get on your phone, and you have to make sure you update your geographical location. So if you say, you're in New York City and you go to California, you don't update it, you know, it's all going to be out of whack. All right. So it's space dependent, right? Yeah. And sometimes these apps will allow you allow it to give you a reminder whenever like a new planetary hour starts, you know. So if you initially set the reminder, and so it'll just go ding or something every time like a new hour sets, and you just watch every time you hear that, say a Mars hour starts and you may a restaurant, then all of a sudden you may hear like a whole heap of dishes crashing to the floor, or, you know, you may see some big I walk in the door, or, you know, and you're starting to see the forms of that planet be revealed to you as you become more aware of it. Okay, so that's one thing I recommend everyone to do if they want to start to get in touch with the planets, by starting to be awake to their forms on their hours, because they do reveal themselves to you. And then from there, you can you know, start to do all sorts of stuff. You can start to be a bit more intentional about what you do on these hours. For example, if you have a day, like I used to have a week where I call it my errands days. You know, it's like the day I had to like just go to town and pick things up, drop things off, do the shopping, you know, all those little jobs, you know. So I used to do that on a Wednesday, because that mimics the signature of Mercury, you know, as the messenger, dropping in from place to place, not getting too deep, you know. You can do things like
running around.
Exactly. So that's from a day perspective, and then an hour perspective, you may like to, just start being intentional with sending important emails that you need to have a lot of clarity across, say, on a Mercury hour, and that kind of thing. What I do think is really significant is actually, I'm not sure if listeners know much annual perfections, like knowing the Lord for the year. Like, is that something that your listeners would be aware of?
Maybe not, because that's such a, very much of a niche of, like traditional astrology perfections. But, well, really briefly, little, I think of like the ice cream flavor of the month, there's.
Yeah, so basically, if you see most astrologers these days, if you have a consultation, they will most likely identify what your activated time lords are for the year, the annual perfected time lord. So you can see an astrologer, find out what your activated time lord is for the year, and then you may like to do a little offering on the planetary day and hour of that planet, because that planet is the manager of your year. So if you want to work magically with your year, yes, you can do a little offering, like, say if it's Saturn, on the Saturday morning, Saturday sunrise, or whenever the later hours are, if you're not an early riser, you may like to, pour out a cup of tea and a candle for Saturn and say the Orphic hymn, or, just to acknowledge it, acknowledge the planet. You can do stuff like that. You can also do planetary charity, like on the day and hour of Saturn. You may want to go out and give some food to a beggar, because beggars are ruled by Saturn. So you learn to identify the forms of that planet and start engaging with those forms with planet. So that's one way you can work with it magically. You can also, like you mentioned before, work on things like gardening and farming, like find out whatever herbs you're working with. One crop that I do always elect a time on is garlics, because it's such a big crop. It's in the ground for a long time and it's expensive to put in, and it's your whole year's worth of garlic. So you want to make sure, you look after that crop. So always elect a time. And because garlics correspond to the hour, to the nature of Mars, I'll always choose a Mars hour to start putting them in. That's another way you can work with planetary hours.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, what about in like the social realm? Like, say, for example, asking your boss for a raise, or asking somebody out on a date. Maybe you'd want to, like, it would be a Venus. You want to do it in the Venus hour, and
exactly. So I guess the best thing to do is firstly work out what you want, like whether it's a petition, a task, or a favor that you have to ask, and try and imagine which planet would be in charge of that particular task. Like if it's asking for a raise, you might speak to Jupiter. If it's going on a date, it might be Venus. So it's all about studying the forms and images of that planet. And then when you can identify what planet's involved, then you might firstly then to give you extra points, like do a little prayer and offering on their hour before then you start, asking for a raise. So you might, in the lead up to it, you might do a few weeks of prayers on the hour, and then you may have luck when you then go and ask for the raise, trying to schedule the time on the planetary hour. And of course, it's always really difficult to work with timing in this consensus reality, and it's all just about chronological timing, not kairos, like qualitative timing. So you can work with the planetary hours energy at different times in your own times to boost, the quality of the hours at subsequent times. Does that make sense? So It's all about building that relationship.
I like when you said that, qualitative time, not quantitative. Can you talk a little more about that? That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I guess, as with this whole change of this reductionist society that we're now living in, and everything's so scientific, and we kind of lost the essence of time for what it truly was, which was actually to describe a quality of a moment, to describe a sentiment of the time. And instead we focus on chronological time, which is, the 1 o'clocks, 2 o'clocks, the actual numbers of that time. So astrology really is the study of time, but more from its qualitative sense. And there's this term called Kairos, which is a Greek god, the god of opportunity. And the story about Kairos was it was a young child. It was kind of Hermes-like, and it was a bald-headed figure with a curl on its back, on the back of its head, and that signified that that time moves, the opportunities and the time and the Kairos moves so quickly that if you're not aware of it, you may be able to grab it by the curl on the back of its head. Otherwise, you'll miss that time if for those that aren't wise, or those that don't follow the wisdom of the stars, essentially. And Freedom Cole, had a quote that said something along the lines of that, understand the nature of time is actually to understand the functioning of the universe. And I think that's what, as astrologers, that's what we're doing, and wanting to learn astrology, that's what we're aspiring to do, even if we're not articulating it that way. We're wanting to work out what the hell's going on.
Right. Right. In a qualitative way, yeah. And it really does. Yeah. I mean, I don't see any other, the tradition of astrology and its ability to deliver that, and therefore giving us all a greater quality of life, that we feel interconnected, that we're connected.
Totally. Exactly. Because, your 1 o'clock will come every day, your 2 o'clocks will come every day, but you may not always get an opportunity to ask for that days, in that particular time where you may get, more luck or more auspiciousness. So it's understanding that. And planetary hours is one way to work in with that. And if people know their birth chart, there's also a way to be able to find out what day and hour you were born on. And that's always quite illuminating too. So I think you may be able to find that on these free softwares online, like astro.com or AstroSeek. I mean, they're so comprehensive.
Yeah, you can. Astro.com and Astro-Seek. Like, for instance, like I know I was born on a Friday, Venus's day. And so, I mean, I know for most people, why is Friday everybody's favorite day? Well, Venus, Venus rules. And isn't it interesting how the understanding of that, like the end of the work week in the Western culture is a Friday. And it's like, oh, finally, the end of the week, we can enjoy life, kick back. We've got the weekend. Yeah, it's Venus ruled, I mean, there's a really profound correlation there.
That's right.
You can find out on, you don't have to buy software, kids, all right? You can just go online and to know the day you were born, what planet ruled, and then the hour of, and sometimes I'll check that when I'm, looking at a chart reading. There's so many things to check, obviously, but that can give another little nuance to, okay, you were born at the hour of Saturn. No wonder you're, hell-bent on making count.
That's right. Like, for some reason, the soul, when it incarnated, decided to come through at the hour of Saturn. So you can meditate on that and see what that means for you. And of course, we do that as well in horary astrology, where one of the factors that we do look at is that, okay, we've got a question, we've got the chart that has the answer, but what hour is the chart? What hour is the chart in? Because that's going to give us some contributions towards the judgment of the ansers.
Oh, yeah. It colors the answer, and it changes it. Yeah.
Yeah, it might show maybe an inner motivation or a deep archetypal resonance, around whatever that planet involves or whatever. Then you also look at maybe what houses that planet rule in your chart as well, and they may speak to you more too that way. So
I love it. Wow, thank you. That's been really awesome. I'm so glad we were able to have this chat and kind of break open this conversation. And I hope we can continue talking and other subjects too. And I know you teach, you have classes, you do, obviously private consults. If people want to find you, can you give us your email address and your website?
So my website is intercycle.com. That's interpsycle.com. And email is intercycle@gmail.com. Best way to keep in touch with my teaching schedule is probably through signing up to my mailing list. That's the best way I can keep in touch, because I'm not always really that consistent on social media.
Right.
But I will say that
how could you?
Yeah, exactly.
They are your social media.
Yeah, except you can't block them. But I will say that for your listeners out there, I'm not sure when this is going to be aired, but I am teaching a free workshop, a webinar for Kepler College on the 11th of June.
Oh, excellent. June 11th.
Yeah.
All right. Kepler
June
College.
11th. Yeah, it's on planetary cycles. So if you've ever wanted to learn more about the key phases throughout a planet's journey, like elongations, rises and sets, retrograde stations, Cassinis, visibility, that kind of stuff, I'll be nerding out there. And also got a 5-week course on solar returns with Kepler starting July 23rd, if you're interested.
Oh, you said you cut out, it was solar returns. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yes, a 5-week kind of deep dive on interpreting solar return charts.
Which in Astro Speak, for those of you who've never heard of that term, that's how we say birthday. We don't say happy birthday, we say happy solar return.
That's right.
Back. So yeah, awesome. Excellent. So I can put the link to Kepler in there too, if you want it, we'll have it all ready to go for us to keep moving the flame of astrology, the flame of knowledge, moving it forward. So in every way we can. So
sure. And just one last thing too, I am developing I'm not sure exactly whether it's a course or a container of some sorts, but just on that topic of Kairos and the qualitative time, I'm doing a project on teaching a qualitative time of the moon, essentially, like teaching people how to understand the qualitative times of the moon as it cycles every month, and learning how to integrate that with ritual work. And I think I'll be working with road opening rituals because they are so broad and they can be tailored to reflect every stage of the moon. So that's something that I'm working on that hopefully I'll be getting out there at some stage close to the end of this year. So yeah, my mailing list is probably the best way to keep in touch with that.
That sounds really super cool. Totally juicy. Fabulous. I love it. Well, thank you again, Shu. This has been awesome, and I'm really grateful for your time. And I will leave you be because I know you've got kids in a house to take care of, but thank you so much. And so anyway, for all of you out there, great being here again with you guys, and we will see you next time for episode 167. So this is Irlianna Samsara, StarSound Speaks, StarSoundastrology.com. Thank you all for listening. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.